Welcome to Salon Talks. I am Mary Elizabeth Williams. I'm so excited to welcome our guest today. It has been described as the Coen brothers meets Lehman Brothers, set in the world of high-frequency trading. The new movie, The Hummingbird Project. It's a thriller, it's a family drama, it's a pitch-black comedy. It stars Alexander Skarsgård, Salma Hayek, Michael Mando, and our guest, Jesse Eisenberg. You know Jesse. He is an actor. He's an author. Maybe you've read his Shouts and Murmurs in The New Yorker, and a playwright. You've seen him in his Oscar-nominated role in The Social Network, Adventureland. Now You See Me, Zombieland. I had to put in for the end of the tour because I love the end
thanks
of the
a lot.
tour. That's one
you
of
lobbied
my,
for it in the intro.
That I did.
Thank you.
I did lobby for it. It's one of my favorites of yours.
Thanks
and
a lot.
It's just a beautiful, lovely film, and if you haven't seen it, you should see it. Justice League. Anyway, you can also see him later this year in The Art of Self-Defense. I want to ask you about that. Zombieland Double Tap. And he has also written a play called Happy Talk that's going to debut in April in New York City, starring Marin Ireland, Susan Sarandon.
Well done.
Okay, my
well
God,
done.
do we have time now to actually have a conversation?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
okay,
that was great.
So let's talk a little bit. I did not know about high-frequency trading. I did not know that was a real thing. It is a real thing. It sounds like it's out of science fiction.
Right.
Not only that, but this movie takes place in about 2012. This is not futuristic. This is the past.
That's right, yeah.
Tell me what high-frequency trading is.
Yeah, it's just the strangest thing, and like you, I didn't know anything about it. Like most people, I think you don't know anything about it, which makes it that much kind of scarier that, you know, once you realize that people are doing just this crazy stuff to kind of beat the stock market by a millisecond. So what this is, what the characters in this movie are doing is digging a tunnel from Kansas to New Jersey to pass information on the stock market quicker than anybody else. And so it sounds like this, you know, complicated thing, but actually what it is really just literally digging a hole across the country. People actually did this. It cost about $500 million to do this real thing. And they dug through mountains, they dug under people's houses to just pass a cable underneath to beat the stock market by a millisecond. And of course, if you're quicker than everybody else on Wall Street, you know, you could make billions of dollars. So that's the idea, and that's what they did. And it's crazy to think of the absurd lengths people go to, you know, in the name of avarice.
A character in the movie describes it as saying, like, oh, so you're like the scalpers who jump ahead of the queue at Ticketmaster when the sales go.
That's right.
And it's like that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like that, and very successful, and they, you know, made a lot of money doing this. I mean, the people that did this, it was detailed in some articles and some books, and the people that did this after they built this line, which they did in secret, of course, because you don't want to let anybody know that you're doing this. Then you end up kind of extorting companies, because if you don't use our line, then you're going to be a millisecond behind us, so you have to use our line. So in a way, it's like, I mean, it's brilliant in a way, but it also, you know, you at the end of the day, it feels like, well, what are you actually doing or providing? Like, there's no service that you're providing except competing for money.
All of this effort, all of this work, all of this time
right.
and that's where the title of the film comes from as well.
That's right, yeah, because they call their project of digging this line the Hummingbird Project, because they're trying to pass the information at the speed of a hummingbird's wing flap. Because if you've seen these hummingbirds, you know, they flap 1,000 times a second or whatever, and so they're trying to pass this information that quickly. So that's what they call their project. But of course, there's an added irony to it, because they're destroying nature in the process of doing this. They're digging through mountains. They're destroying people's houses. It's just crazy. And then, you think, like, God, people do stuff like this all the time and no one knows about it.
Right. That's the thing that's amazing about this. It's kind of like, it was really reminding me in a strange way of The Handmaid's Tale, because Margaret Atwood has said that everything in The Handmaid's Tale is real, is something that has already happened. And then you put it together and you have a dystopia.
Yeah.
And it's the same with this movie. It's all real.
Right.
And then you put it together, you put the elements together into this fictional story, and
Right.
it just seems, it beggars belief.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, one of the interesting things about the movie is, though, like, the characters are kind of like second-generation Russian immigrants, and, like, I think they feel a little bit like outsiders, and they feel like the establishment is against them. And so in a way, they're kind of, they're heroes in a way, because they're kind of like fighting against the establishment. But of course, the thing that they're doing is, this kind of meaningless, greedy project, and they're lying to people. But they're heroes in the sense that they're kind of like going against the establishment. Salma Hayek works at this company, this kind of ruthless company, and this big, conglomerate, and they're kind of they're trying to do things, sidestep it, basically. She just seems like she's having the time of her life. Yeah, I think she loved playing the role. She plays this cutthroat, trader and CEO, and yeah, she just had a great time. And also she's an iconic person, and she's one of these people that transcends acting and kind of is this iconic figure in society. And that's to the movie's advantage because there's a kind of presence that she brings that is helpful to establish that character.
Yeah, and she's the man. You're sticking it to the man, and
Exactly.
she's the man. Now, I read an interview you did in the Irish Press maybe about 6 months ago, where you said that you had been sent both the role that you took, which is Vincent,
Oh, yeah.
and his cousin Anton, who is now played in this film by Alexander Skarsgård. What made you choose Vincent?
Vincent is like, I thought there was something like really sweet about him because he's aggressive and he's a cheat and he's a liar. But and I mean, if given the opportunity, anytime I'd like to play characters like that because you kind of challenge yourself to figure out how to kind of understand and sympathize with these people that are maybe not like honorable in society. That's just an interesting acting challenge, But also as you and I discussed, he's dealing with this kind of existential crisis, and I don't want to give too much away, but like halfway through the movie, you realize he's actually dealing with something far more like existentially threatening to him than just this project, and so it just felt like such an exciting character. I could relate to also the character, he and I come from the same place in the world, Russian Jewish immigrants, and I've also had the feeling like, the establishment I don't really feel comfortable in certain kind of, the country club, so to speak, culture, and in a way it makes you work harder, like, I guess, you kind of get more desperate, and it kind of inspires you to be creative.
Yeah, your character has an observation late in the film where he talks about time. And this is a film that is very much about time and about our perception of it, right? And I think that that's something that your character is really exploring throughout it, and his relationship with time changes. These microseconds, and then this expanse, and then there are these characters who are Amish, so they're living in the present, but they're also living in the past.
That's exactly right.
And it feels like it all kind of comes together into this interesting meditation.
That's right. Yeah, and one of the realizations my character has is, if you only had a millisecond to live, would you still experience it like a full life? In the same way that now we live to 80 years old, let's say in this country, which we're lucky to, which we're lucky for, but of course previous generations lived a lot less time, and but did they consider themselves not having a full life because they lived half as long as people in the future? So anyway, my character, who's dealing with his own kind of existential crisis, has this revelation about time. It's just so beautiful, especially because the movie is about Wall Street and it's a fast-paced, kind of this thriller, element, of course, but it's really this meditation on what is important and about how we spend our time.
And it seems like those are subjects that you are really intrigued by in your off-camera life. And I'm wondering, because it seems like you tend to be drawn to these characters who are maybe a little morally ambiguous, and then in your real life you're very socially aware, you really care about social justice. Is there something where maybe you get to play out a little other side of the world that you're curious about? Because this is a film about terribly greedy people doing morally objectionable thing.
Yeah, well put, and I think you're probably right and astute in a way I never thought about it, but I think that's probably very true, is you get to kind of act out the things that you would never want to do in real life. But I think there's probably another element to it, which is that I think if you kind of present characters in a morality tale that are immoral, it signals to an audience a set of values that maybe they should live by. So for example, if my character, who's very greedy in this movie, succeeds, then what the audience would be taking away is that, well, greed is a positive thing, and we should try to make as much money as possible. But what happens in this movie is that these characters don't succeed, and I don't want to give away why, but these characters don't exactly succeed, and so the message of the movie is actually more nuanced, and I would say it's a good morality tale. When I write plays, I normally play characters that are, bigoted and selfish, but the message of the plays are never that. Of course, the message of the plays is, these people are in society, and why are they in society, and what is driving them, and how can society function with people that are horrible, and how how can we deal with them, and and what is driving those people, so we can better understand what's driving somebody who on the surface appears like a horrible person.
Well, it's so interesting you say that, because I've been thinking a lot lately about the whole cancel culture and these sort of superficial readings sometimes of these characters, where it's just like, is it okay to have these characters out there in fiction? I mean, which is really a debate that is going on now about the objectionable presence of characters who are morally ambiguous.
Right.
Which is like, how do we learn what is good if we don't have? I mean, this is a story as old as fairy tales and fables.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I guess it's easy to not see the context. I mean, if the context, but there are certain things where the context is bad, and we should kind of rethink maybe that. But a lot of times, maybe, I don't know specifically what you're referring to, but of course, if you miss the context of it, then you're going to lose the point. So if you have a morality play, which in a way the Hummingbird Project is, it's kind of a morality tale, because the characters are dealing with major themes and making big life decisions, and the context that surrounds these immoral characters leads to a moral message, of course.
And I'm not giving anything away because it's in the trailer. It's also very funny.
Yeah.
It's a really funny, absurd, over-the-top, physical comedy.
That's right. Yeah, because what these characters are doing, I mean, you have these Wall Street guys, basically trekking through swamps, blasting through mountains. And so it's, it's just a naturally kind of fish out of water funny scenario. My character, we grew up in Brooklyn, and and then he's in the Midwest, and talking to these people that he feels totally foreign to, and then physically digging through stuff. I mean, with tractors, and and these are people from Wall Street. So it's a really interesting. I would say, like, it's a really interesting take on Wall Street. It shows that the tentacles of Wall Street extend far beyond downtown Manhattan.
So Jesse, I know you said that you chose the role of Vincent because it was a little more out of the box for you. And yet, I read a review of a film recently, and it described one of the characters as a Jesse Eisenberg type.
A movie I'm in? Or
yes, the movie that you're in, where it's like they describe your character as like, he's a Jesse Eisenberg type. And I'm wondering, do you think that, like, what would a Jesse Eisenberg type mean? Now you have this long body of work. You have a really varied career. You've played so many different characters, and yet if someone says, well, that's a Jesse Eisenberg type character, you must hear that in Hollywood.
Yeah, I heard, it's interesting, like, I don't think anybody can possibly perceive themselves in the way that they are perceived by others. You'd have to have some amazing objectivity to understand, to think of yourself, obviously, the way that other people think of you. So I think of myself, obviously, as like a basic, unremarkable person, but other people view me through the context of whatever they grew up with, and so maybe they think I speak in a fast way, for example. I've heard that, but the family I come from, I'm one of the slow ones. So in my context, I'm an unremarkable person, but I guess to other people, or maybe to a large group of people, I seem unusual in some ways. But no one feels like they're an unusual person unless they're actively trying to be eccentric, which people do, but I don't.
Well, if you live in New York, I thought we're all trying to be eccentric.
Yeah, I know,
here.
but that's why I moved to the Midwest.
So you can be normal or ordinary or whatever, whatever that means. Okay, so speaking of prototypical Jesse Eisenberg characters, we've got a big movie coming out later this year. There were 10 years later.
Oh, yeah.
We're going back to Zombieland.
Oh, yeah.
This is the little movie that could.
Yeah.
This is, I don't think anyone would have thought when it came out in 2009 that we would be here now. This is really exciting. How did this all come together, and what is it like now, a decade later? You are in your 30s, you are a dad, you are a different guy in a lot of ways, I assume.
Yeah, it's so strange to see everybody back. It's the same cast, of course. I mean, the biggest change is Abigail Breslin, who was a 12-year-old girl in the first Zombieland, is now a 22-year-old woman, and still obviously an amazing actress, of course, but just a different person. That was very unusual, and she's obviously still wonderful. The movie was like a cult hit as well as a popular movie, and so it kind of was it was like kind of beloved by people, the first Zombieland, that is, and so they wanted to do a sequel, but the actors never thought the script was right, and the director never thought they got it exactly right. There must have been 10 scripts, and finally they wrote one that we all thought was great.
And then you have to line up the schedules of all of these in-demand, Oscar-winning, Oscar-nominated, very successful,
busy
actors.
But the truth is, everybody loved it. I think everybody really loved it. There's something special about the movie. these guys who wrote it, Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, they wrote like Deadpool as well. They're really clever, fresh writers, fresh ideas and everything, and original scenarios. But they write with real heart, and so I think it was an unusual movie in that it was like a zombie comedy, but that it felt like it was. I don't know, it felt like my mother would love it too, like that it's about these sweet themes that the characters are trying to build a family and there's sensitivity to it. And so I think it was an unusual way to tell that kind of story.
Right, which is an extension of the first film. I mean, it really is about family.
Right, exactly.
But now it's in the context of this is a story that has really become part of pop culture, that is so beloved.
Yeah.
You must have approached it with a different sense of, I mean, you were just at South by Southwest, right? I mean, you're probably hearing a lot from people over the past decade about how much this movie means. Yeah,
people. I can't tell you, like even yesterday somebody said, my dad bought the movie. He's like, are you making a sequel? I said, yeah. He goes, my dad bought the movie pirated, but we loved it so much that we went out as a family and bought it for real. Like, oh, no need.
That is the ultimate compliment as an actor, right? I paid for your work.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. When I didn't have to.
Right. Who has to?
I know. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I think, it's so strange. Yeah, you're like, I don't know. I did like 3 movies that year, and you don't know what's going to be popular and what no one's going to. You put the same effort into it. It's strange when something kind of becomes a, cult hit. I guess it's nice.
And you're doing 3 movies this year, right? You've got this. You have The Art of Self-Defense coming up. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I've seen the trailer. It's really strange. Really strange.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, this guy who made this movie is just brilliant. It's like a movie about a kind of timid guy who decides to take karate to defend himself, and then gets like lured into this cult of this karate world. It's just brilliant, though. I mean, the dialogue is brilliant. It's really funny, and in a kind of more macro way, it's really about kind of absurd notions of masculinity and aspirations for masculinity, and why we pursue forms of masculinity that are a lot of times not healthy.
Yeah, and absurd and toxic.
Yeah, exactly.
In service of trying to do something good, maybe even. But
or in terms of like, in this case, like trying to defend himself, trying to learn how to be, more confident. But he realizes actually, there's far more danger in kind of becoming the alpha than there would be remaining a beta.
And then you have this other film that I guess we're working on in the fall, that is fascinating to me because I believe this is your first biopic since The Social Network, the first film playing a real life person. You're playing Marcel Marceau, who I suspect a lot of people don't know anymore who he was, the very famous mime, but I did not know this side of his life at all. I mean, I grew up knowing who he was, and I had never heard this story. So
it's an amazing story.
Tell me about Marcel Marceau that I didn't know.
Right, so as you know, obviously, he's probably the world's greatest mime. He's the mime we think of when we think of a mime, the white face, the striped shirt. This comes from him. Or he's popularized it at least.
Right, so if you don't know who Marcel Marceau is, but you know what a mime is, what you're thinking of, that picture in your mind, is Marcel Marceau.
Yeah, that's right. He popularized that kind of style and what we think of. And but during World War II, he was living in France and ended up kind of saving about 200 kids, taking them across the border into Switzerland, hiding from the Nazis. Incredible stories. Of course, that anytime you hear a story from that period, it's shocking, of course, but they're all true. And he ended up, and he didn't talk about it a lot. Towards the end of his life, he talked a little more about it. But I think he kind of, he took his art very seriously, and he was doing an art that is on the fringes of mainstream culture. And so I think he probably wanted to be known for that more than, I don't know, some heroic story, or maybe he was just a humble guy. It's hard to say exactly why he didn't talk about it that much. It's a really special story because through helping these kids and saving these kids, he discovered what he liked about his art. And so he really developed this mime through saving these kids. It's just an amazing story about how we can kind of use our creativity, in the service of others.
Yeah, and I think anybody who now looks at his work and mime is such an easy sort of thing to take pot shots up.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
To see now him and see his work in that context, I think will just give it a completely different sort of interpretation for a whole new generation.
Well put, and I hope you're right, and I think that's true, is that, I think like in the 80s and early 90s, like mime became kind of a punchline, and I don't know exactly why. I've talked to my mime friends, and everybody kind of has a different origin story of what happened to their craft, of why it became kind of thought of as silly. I think it was kind of like became like a street mime culture, where they have, like asking for, like busking, and I think that maybe that became annoying to, people on the street or something. But anyway, this movie, I hope what you're saying is true, that it kind of, it shows mime in this really beautiful way, and that shows how it helped these kids survive the war.
Gives it some re-context. So I also want to ask you before you go, because we were talking about this a little bit before, you have been so honest and transparent in your own experiences of mental health and talking about mental health awareness. And, I have written a lot about my own mental health issues and my anxieties, and I have a very close family member who has OCD. And you did a video about 2 years ago that really moved me so profoundly, where you had a conversation with your younger self about OCD. Right. Can you just talk a little bit about what moved you to do that and what your message is? Because there are so many people out there who are living with OCD who don't even know it yet, who don't have a diagnosis. Right. And it's really, really so misunderstood. Yeah,
I will say though it feels far more, far less stigmatized than when I was a kid. Of dealing with, I had terrible anxiety when I was a kid. I go to schools now and talk to kids, and it does seem like there's a sensitivity around it that I didn't necessarily see when I was younger. But what I said in the video, and which we could talk about now, which is that I would have told myself to try to find some kind of, to try to find the value in that actually, anxiety oftentimes is associated with a sensitivity, is associated with some kind of social insight. The problem a lot of times with it is that you have these feelings and then you blame yourself and punish yourself for feelings that are quite normal and oftentimes can be useful in your life.
Yeah, I read a thing on Reddit just today that said anxiety disorders are when you have conspiracy theories about yourself.
Right, exactly.
And I thought that was pretty well put.
Right, exactly. And then of course you punish yourself for having this conspiracy theory, and then so it ends up kind of like this cyclical pattern of torment. In terms of so. I'm glad Emma Stone, who's in the Zombieland movies with me, and she works with that organization where you saw that video, and she's also very open about it. And I think it's probably helpful for younger people to hear. I guess it would have been helpful for me to hear that too, from somebody older who seems like me, but seems to also be kind of like functioning in society and doing well in a certain area. I guess that would be inspiring, so I'm glad I would do that, and I talk to people all the time. I write and act in plays, and I play characters with anxiety a lot of times, and people come after the show and tell me, you've inspired me because I have, anxiety, and I read about it, and it never occurred to me when I was saying anything about it or writing these plays or anything that it's meaningful to people. But I think just kind of discussing it and maybe destigmatizing it in a way. My friend wrote a beautiful piece about mental health after he lost his girlfriend to a suicide called Sign My Cast, trying to describe the difference between, if you break your arm, and you're on the football team or something, everybody signs your cast at school and, you're lauded and, deified. But if you have some kind of, mental health issue or something, it's a private, embarrassing thing. And so he wrote this beautiful piece called Sign My Cast about trying to kind of destigmatize mental health and have it be seen in the way that if a kid breaks his arm and he's a hero in school, he's dealing with something difficult, and we should look at somebody who's maybe dealing with anxiety in the same way. They're kind of going through something and we should help them.
Jesse, that's such an apt metaphor. I broke my arm 2 years ago, and I remember thinking how people would open doors for me and help me carry my packages, and it was so lovely. And yet when you're struggling with anxiety or PTSD or OCD or whatever it is, you so often feel like you're suffering in silence.
That's right.
And that's exactly.
Burdening.
Yes,
burdening of the people.
exactly. And that's exactly what this is about. And it's just about letting people know it's the same kind of thing.
Right.
And it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to be who you are in that moment.
That's right.
Oh, well, now I want to read that. So.
Oh yeah. I'll give it to you.
All right. Awesome. Jesse, thank you so much. What a pleasure to talk to you. The movie, once again, is called The Hummingbird Project. Jesse Eisenberg, what a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.